Tommy and welcome to another musical adventure. Today's adventure, we're going to be taking a look at the king of rock and roll, none other than Elvis Presley. And what I hope to achieve with this video is we're going to take a look at what's out there for Elvis, because looking at Elvis Presley as a recording artist can be a very daunting task. There's just a wealth of material out there. And so for a novice or for somebody that's not sure and they just kind of want to check him out, I hope this video maybe serves as a little bit of a guide, what you may want to look for, and you'll probably find some really great music. Because here's the thing, when you separate Elvis the musician versus Elvis the icon, and sometimes it's hard to separate the two because he is so iconic, you will discover some really, really good music and some music that's worthy of a music collection. Elvis Presley. You know, Quentin Tarantino famously said that there's Beatles people and Elvis people, and they usually don't go together. I can tell you, I love the Beatles, and I love Elvis. I have a good friend who, his name's Rusty, and he described it like this. He sort of said Elvis and the Beatles, the difference between the two is that Elvis was showbiz. He came up through sort of this showbiz type thing, which is what the 50s were. It wasn't really a rock and roll garage thing that happened. And the Beatles were rock and roll. They kind of defined themselves playing in the clubs in Hamburg and working their way up through. And so there's two different sort of mentalities. However, Elvis has some really good music, and I hope to show that here. Now, before I get started with the music, I do want to talk about a couple of books. I've talked about them before. I'm going to talk about them again. Elvis Presley, The Last Train to Memphis, The Rise of Elvis by Peter Guralnick. And there's a second volume, Careless Love, The Unmaking of Elvis Presley. This first book deals with Elvis up to the Army. The second book deals with him after the Army up until his death. They're both fantastic books. There's so many books out there about Elvis Presley, and so many things have been written. Some of them make them out to be some kind of hero that never did anything wrong. Some of them are just designed to tear him down and make him look like a complete buffoon. These books humanize Elvis, but they tell a sort of complete picture. They're just great reading. For fans of music biographies, I can't recommend those Peter Guralnick books enough. But let's talk about the recordings. That's what you came here for. Now, I want to tell you guys something, a little disclaimer. Yours truly, your host, used to work at Graceland. That's right. Several years ago, I took a job at Elvis Presley Enterprises, and I worked at Graceland. What did you do when you were there? I'll tell you what I did. I worked upstairs. I cleaned out Elvis's bedroom, and no, I didn't. I did not do those things. That's a joke. I actually worked in the merchandising department. I worked across the street. If you've ever been to Graceland, there's gift shops and stuff over there. I worked in that department, and one of my favorite things, there was a record store over there called Good Rockin', and I worked there, and one of the things that I did as I worked there was I really studied up on my Elvis recordings. Now, there are a lot of people out there who know a whole lot more about Elvis than I do, so I don't claim to be any kind of expert. But while I was there, I did put together a discography and a book, so when people came in and asked questions about where they could find a particular song or a particular recording, they could, whoever was working there could refer to the book and probably pinpoint it, help them find it. So I knew what was out there, I knew what was available, I knew what wasn't available, and just, again, there's so much of it, it's just overwhelming. But these are, to me, the essential Elvis recordings, the stuff you gotta have if you're gonna get into Elvis. And we're gonna start with the obvious place, and I think you guys probably can guess where we're going with this. That's right, the Sun Sessions. These are the classic records he made for Memphis Recording Services in the mid-50s, the records that launched his career as Elvis, the king of rock and roll. Absolutely indispensable sides. That's All Right Mama, Baby Let's Play House, Good Rockin' Tonight, all of those songs. Now, as a side note, also, I want to point out these Black Label RCA Victors. You can usually find these for pretty affordable prices. They're later pressings. I'm not one of those purists that say you have to get original pressings of anything. I think sometimes later pressings can even be superior to original pressings. So if you're out and about and you don't have a whole lot of money to spend and you want to get some Elvis on the cheap, take a look for these. They've got this inner sleeve with the catalog printed on them. And you can use these. These came out after Elvis died, and you can find them at pretty affordable prices. And so I tend to gravitate toward those, not only for the price point, but because they're usually you can find them in great shape and they sound really good. But the Sun Sessions, an obvious for any Elvis collector. Also available on CD as Sunrise. This was a 2 CD set. This pretty much collected everything that Elvis did while recording in Memphis at Sun. Now, Elvis famously had his contract sold by Sam Phillips to RCA Records. Now, RCA is really the label that launched Elvis into the mega superstar that he was. And those recordings he made for RCA, they were trying to kind of replicate that Sun sound and that early sort of rockabilly thing that Elvis was doing. But this little collection came out in the mid-90s. It's called Elvis 56. And this collects all of the stuff that Elvis was recording at RCA. And these are some of the quintessential Elvis tracks. Heartbreak Hotel, Hound Dog, those early RCA sides. Now, a lot of you would argue that Elvis in the 50s is the greatest period of Elvis. And I might be inclined to agree. I mean, all of Elvis's 50s cuts are pretty solid and essential. This box set came out, I believe, in the early 90s. And this first volume, there's 3 of them, and they go by decades. This is the complete 50s master. So this pretty much takes care of everything. If all you want is 50s Elvis, here you go. This box set, worth seeking out, worth finding. Now, so many Elvis compilations out there. It's overwhelming. This is one that you can find usually pretty widespread. It's put out on RCA. It's a 2-record set, Worldwide Gold Award Hits, Parts 1 and 2. What is cool about this particular set and why I'm recommending it, and this is just for those that just want a compilation and that's as far as they want to go, this actually has mono recordings. Now that's the thing with Elvis. A lot of those 50s recordings, they were reprocessed for stereo, fake stereo. There's just, what are you getting when you buy these things? These are pretty much like you're getting the original mixes and original records as they were sort of intended. Heartbreak Hotel, Don't Be Cruel, Hound Dog, All Shook Up, and some later stuff like Mess of Blues, It's Now or Never. So this kind of covers a lot of those early years, and it's only a 2-record set, so you don't really have to get too deep. Hey, but Elvis made albums. So John Lennon famously said Elvis died after he went into the Army. Hey, John, I respect you, but I just don't think that's a fair assessment because Elvis made some great music after he got out of the Army. And one of those was this album, Elvis is Back. And this is one of the first albums he made after he got out of the Army. Now, mine happens to be an original pressing. I'll show you guys the label. Great RCA Victor. I'm not going to take it out of the bag. Sorry if there's any glare. But Elvis is Back is, to me, one of the great sort of Elvis albums. It's released in 1960, and it's just got some really cool songs on it. It's got his version of Fever, some more bluesy stuff like Dirty Dirty Feeling, Such a Night, also Reconsider Baby. So you got Elvis getting a little bluesy. The thing about Elvis, while he was in the Army, he really kind of developed his voice a little more, and that's where he kind of developed these sort of operatic baritone, maybe, if you will, that Elvis kind of developed, which probably gets on some people's nerves. But, I mean, Elvis became a better singer through his years in the Army and came out and kind of developed that a little bit more. Now, it didn't get full-blown until the 70s and later on. Now, this is where Elvis kind of dives headlong into a movie career, and this is probably where people think that Elvis should have died with the Army, because the movies and the movie career, while, and don't get me wrong, I love Elvis movies. I think they're a lot of fun. They're not going to win any Oscars, but they're a great way to spend a Sunday afternoon, most of them. But some of them are truly dreadful films, and each one had these soundtracks. And while there are some really good songs on those soundtracks, I don't think Elvis really made any just long-standing, substantial music. No offense to anyone that loves that period, because I like some of those songs too. Viva Las Vegas comes to mind. There's several songs. The Blue Hawaii soundtrack in particular, Can't Help Falling in Love, has some really, really nice songs on it. But to me, Elvis in the 60s sort of stood still while everybody passed him by. The other day I saw the movie Easy Come, Easy Go. It came out in 1967. And here's Elvis in tight black singing Yoga Is as Yoga Does. And I was thinking somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought, Well, here's Elvis doing Yoga Is as Yoga Does, this really cheesy, silly song. Meanwhile, the Beatles are doing Sgt. Pepper. Jimi Hendrix is coming along. And music really was just taking off. Now, he did still record the occasional non-soundtrack side, and they were kind of released sparingly. But one of the things I want to talk about for a second is during this period and all throughout his career, Elvis recorded gospel music. Now, I'm going to tell you guys a helpful hint. Elvis won 3 Grammy Awards in his lifetime. None of them were for rock and roll music. Elvis's 3 Grammys were all awarded to him through his gospel recordings. And this album that came out in the mid-60s, How Great Thou Art, is one of the better gospel recordings from Elvis. Elvis really loved gospel music. Again, that black RCA, I think this is the way to go with Elvis recordings. But all of Elvis's gospel recordings are pretty essential, and I highly recommend them. They're very rewarding. Elvis had a feel for that kind of music. I think he grew up in churches, and so singing those songs was just a very natural thing for him. Now, you don't want to seek all those recordings out. There's a CD set called Peace in the Valley. This is the complete gospel recordings. It's a 3 CD set, and it collects everything Elvis ever did gospel, from the 50s all the way through the 70s. All of his gospel recordings on a 3 CD set, if that's the period of Elvis that you're interested in. So back to the movie thing. He kind of wraps up doing the movies, and he does a famous special on NBC in 1968, and it's now called the NBC Elvis Comeback Special, the 68 Comeback Special. And it was a special that featured Elvis in the black leather. You've seen the shots, the iconic thing where he's jamming with the guys kind of in the ring. And this is the soundtrack to that special. There were some production numbers on there. And it was simply titled Elvis. It wasn't called the 68 Comeback Special. And nobody really thought of it as a comeback. But it's widely considered the reason it's called the Comeback Special is because Elvis was returning to live performances. He was kind of getting away from the whole movie thing. He was kind of reclaiming his place in music. And so that's why that special is held in such regard. A CD set, a 2 CD set called Memories, kind of collects all those recordings, and definitely worth seeking out if that's your bag. I love some of the stuff on the 68 Comeback Special, just the rawness and just the energy that goes along with it. So, this is my argument for anyone that says Elvis never made a good record after 1960. And I say malarkey to that, because this is my absolute favorite Elvis Presley record. If I were sent away to a desert island and was asked to take one Elvis record with me, it would be From Elvis in Memphis, recorded in 1969 at Chips Moman's American Sound Studios in Memphis, a funky little studio that was working with a lot of soulful people like the Box Tops and groups like that. Elvis came along and made this album. It is soulful, it's funky. Elvis is in great voice. It's just before he kind of turns into the sort of big bellowing, baritone. And he's still got a little bit of that rawness. Now, the front cover picture, don't let it fool you, that's from the 68 Comeback Special. But this album was made from the recordings in 1969. Now, he made several recordings at this session, but Only the Strong Survive, It Keeps Right On a Hurtin', Power of My Love, which is just a great, powerful blues number. Any Day Now, you got some like country tinge stuff like True Love Travels on a Gravel Road, and the song everyone knows from this record, In the Ghetto, which was a big hit. Now, another one of the recordings that was released from that album or from those sessions was Suspicious Minds. Suspicious Minds is probably, in my opinion, the greatest single Elvis Presley ever released. So that right there dispels any notion that he didn't make any good recordings after 1960, because one listen to that album and I guarantee you'll recognize why Elvis is held in such regard. On CD, there's a 2 CD set, and it's called Suspicious Minds, the Memphis 1969 Anthology. This collects all of those songs because most of that material was spread out through singles and through different periods. Elvis is or Back in Memphis was one of the titles. There was a live/studio album that came out, and so he got a lot of traction out of those recordings he made in Memphis. So it wasn't just that one album. There were several other things that were also related to that, and all of those sides are collected on this CD set. Now, another thing Elvis did that a lot of people aren't aware of is that Elvis actually made a concept album. Yes, he did. You know, a lot of people think, well, only that was for like those British guys like The Who and the Beatles. No. Elvis made one too. It's called Elvis Country. I'm 10,000 years old. Now, is it a concept album in the sense that it tells a story? Probably not. But it follows a very good theme. And Elvis kind of, you know, had dived into country sounds a little bit throughout his career. So it was a natural thing for him to do a country-tinged album in that period. Again, that black RCA, you can't go wrong. But definitely a cool album, and it follows through. Now, Elvis by the 70s, and this is one of the things that happens, and I think Colonel Parker sort of invented rock and roll management. And throughout the 50s and 60s, everything became about product, like just getting product out there. So the sense that Elvis went into the studio to make a record, like say the Stones or the Beatles did, that just didn't happen. It was all about Elvis would go in and he'd record several songs, and then they'd release them somehow. So throughout the 70s, a lot of Elvis's albums were sort of these hodgepodge things. And one of the things about Elvis albums in the 70s was that they all had pictures of him that were taken in concert. So if you see an Elvis album cover from the 70s, it looks like it's going to be a live album. And there are live albums from the 70s. Elvis Live is really, to me, depending on the period, but I love the 1969 through about 1971 period. I know that Aloha from Hawaii was very influential and that it's sort of an iconic moment. He's wearing the white jumpsuit. He looks good. But to me, the performance is a little flat. I don't think Elvis is as great as he could have been live. If you really want to get to live Elvis and the energy and the greatness of Elvis in concert, there's another film called That's the Way It Is. And it was released in 1970. This is right when the second season he played in Vegas. And it mixes rehearsal footage along with a live concert. And to me, this is great live Elvis. It's before he sort of got bored with it. He still is shockingly good looking. And it's before the jumpsuits got really outlandish and the capes and all of that stuff. And so I recommend That's the Way It Is as a film and also as an album. It's a pretty good album. Elvis in the 70s, there's some good stuff. He recorded at Stax, actually, and produced some really good sides at Stax that were released on several 70s albums. And finally, one other thing I want to talk about with Elvis in the last sort of recording is I think Elvis did great Christmas music as well. And this CD collection called If Every Day Was Like Christmas, it's a single CD set. It collects all of the Christmas recordings that Elvis made throughout the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s. And so that is where I go for Christmas stuff for Elvis. Of course, like I said, that stuff's been sprinkled out on several albums. But I hope that's a rough guide on where to begin with Elvis. Kind of pick a period and go with it. You can't go wrong with the 1969 Memphis stuff. The 50 stuff is all pretty essential. There's good stuff on the soundtracks. I don't think it's essential stuff. And there's a few things here and there. And like I said, there's a lot of compilations to pick from. So what do you think? Do you have a favorite Elvis recording? Did I completely leave something out that you guys are like, why did he leave that out? Comment down below. Let me know what you think. I love interacting with you guys, so tell me what I missed. You know, again, there's a lot out there, so it's very likely that I missed something. And again, it's just cool to hear from you. Give the old thumbs up if you're so inclined. Give the thumbs down if you want to. But either way, let me know what you think. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. I love having you along for the ride. In the meantime, I want you all to save the Texas prairie chicken.